Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another edition of the All In Show here on the Clemson Voice of College Football YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jordan Bowman. Of course, I'm not usually the face that greets you at the beginning of these shows. Tiger Paul Craven is here. He is currently at a softball practice, so he's going to be joining us from his car. So I'm basically running point tonight. So it's always a good time. But it will be the two of us, so no worries. No need to freak out. But we have a lot to cover today. It's been a very eventful week and weekend for Clemson football in general. And we're going to just spend a lot of time talking about everything that happened there and the returns that we've gotten today and yesterday, and maybe potential, returns coming soon. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, please hit that like button. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. And also hit the notification because, we go live every Thursday at 8, but we want you guys to be able to make sure those notifications are on. So if we start late or we change times or anything like that, you guys will be notified. So be sure to do that as well. Feel free to hit the links in the description. The Amazon link is there if you want to subscribe to the Voice of College Football Patreon. That is a great way to support the show as well. And the Super Chat feature is available to you as well. And that helps us, continue to do what we're doing. So be sure to do that. But without further ado, I will bring on my co-host, Tiger Paul Craven, joining us from the softball fields. How you doing, my man?
Hey, what's up, everybody? What's up, Jordan? Good to be here tonight. As you previously let the people know, I am on site at my daughter's softball practice. It seems like softball has become a year-round sport for me. It used to be a spring thing, and now it seems that with travel and everything, it has become a year-round sport. But I couldn't be happier to be here tonight to talk the big official visit weekend, some recruiting stuff we get to talk about, exciting stuff to come for the Clemson Tigers for the 2025 class. So, man, happy to be here and look forward to chopping it up with the people for an hour or so about our Clemson Tigers, man.
Absolutely, man. Just really eventful week in Clemson sports in general. Shout out to the baseball team securing their first regional victory since 2010.
Hey, man, it's been way too long. It's crazy. I've been watching the ride. It was a great regional for Clemson, and now they get to host the Super Regional. Florida Gators coming to town. I think they're opening up McWhorter Stadium, the softball stadium, for everybody to watch it on the Jumbotron. For those of us who couldn't get tickets to the baseball game, because that place is going to be absolutely insane. That environment's going to be crazy. I wish I could make it down for the game. Unfortunately, I cannot, but I can't wait to watch it on TV and hopefully our Tigers can get it done, and they'll be on their way to Omaha for the first time in what seems like forever.
Yeah, man. Hey, that's the expectation around here. Clemson, if football didn't exist, baseball would be the king.
That's right.
These sports. So, and
that's right.
The history there doesn't need to be stated, doesn't need to be said. And so, the last 14 years have been certainly not what we've been used to. So it's been a fun ride for sure. But we're not here to talk about baseball tonight. We are ready to dive into everything that's happened within the last week as far as Clemson recruiting. Massive weekend, a lot of big time recruits. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about that, and we'll spend a lot of time answering those tonight after we do a little recap. So feel free. We star your questions. We've begun doing that so we can get to questions that are asked earlier in the show. So do that if you so please. And of course, if you want to get to the front of the line and make sure that your question is read, the super chat feature is available. But with that being said, man, what a weekend! What a weekend in Clemson. We talked about the baseball team and it just kind of their success, and I don't think a lot of people realize how much of an environment that created for the official visit weekend. That was a really, really big deal, and it was something that I heard a lot. Just seeing the campus like alive, especially since school is out, the semester is over. Uh, it was just a really, really great environment for these high school recruits to come and see what Clemson is really about and what their experience as a student athlete can be. And the Tiger fans showed out. I thought that was a really, really cool thing. And one of the things that a lot of recruits pointed out, and you saw some of them at the baseball game, at the regionals. And so that was really cool. How did you, when you kind of read about the official visit weekend, what kind of stuff did you kind of pick up, and what stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, we always look forward to this official visit weekend every single year. As Clemson Tiger fans, we know exactly how important this weekend is. It's something that Clemson has started and hasn't been around very long, about 3 years at this point. We've had a lot of success the past 2 seasons with it. Specifically last season, it kind of like took off right after the official visit weekend. A little bit slower coming out of this official visit weekend, but you're hearing a lot of the stuff that you would expect to hear as a Clemson fan coming out of a big recruiting weekend like that. And to your point, I don't think it can be understated or overstated how important the baseball team's success was to this weekend, because on an otherwise mundane weekend in Clemson, South Carolina, where, maybe there's not a lot of buzz around the campus. You mentioned everybody's gone home for the summer. There's not a lot going on, but, smack dab in the middle of a massive recruiting weekend, you got the baseball team out here hosting a regional and playing outside their mind, and the fans and the community are there going crazy and supporting them. So they got to see just a little taste of kind of what the Valley is like. Some of these guys have already been to a game in the Valley, but you get the point. They got a sense of what Clemson is outside of Death Valley on Saturdays, right? And I think that's important. You heard a lot of the talk of the culture that Clemson has, and I know there's some eye rolls out there when that kind of stuff gets stated about Clemson because of Dabo Swinney and some of his philosophies on the way that college football is shifting and changing, and him kind of sticking to his guns with his morals and the way that he wants to build a program. But what I want to tell Clemson fans is just go and read some of the interviews of these guys and not all of them will commit, but go read some of the interviews of these guys and the stuff that resonated with them. They're not Clemson fans. They're not they didn't grow up lifelong Clemson fans like a lot of us, but just go read interviews of what they thought of the official visit weekend and what truly resonated with them. And it's always the togetherness that Clemson projects over the weekend. And it starts with the way that they lay out the weekend. They're very deliberate in how they lay things out. They're very deliberate in what they take the recruits through. And then they got to see the community excited about baseball and coming out with that. They get to hear from former players. They get to hear from current players on the roster. And it's really the family atmosphere. You hear a lot of that. You hear a lot of the genuine nature that the coaching staff seems to approach things with. They really do. I think Dabo Swinney and the Clemson staff as a whole just do a really good job of just being real with these guys and letting them know, like, hey, this is what it is, right? And I think that's important. And I think Clemson's philosophy, I know a lot of people out there don't like it, don't agree with it, but I think it still resonates with a lot of people. And you heard a lot of that coming out of the official visit weekend, as you would expect.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's something that we constantly get reminded of each time this happens. It's like, especially when we hit that lull in May where, there's not a whole lot happening, at least outwardly. I mean, these coaches are hitting the trail and in contact and doing a lot of work behind the scenes. But after the run of commits that Clemson had, earlier in the year, it was like, okay, well, now we've kind of hit this slow period, and now we're just, it's kind of quiet. Things aren't really happening, and some people, it's just the fan mind in you always is like, oh man, are we striking out on guys? Are we
Right.
not, are we not attracting players? Are we losing ground on certain guys that we thought we were in good position for? And so that always seems to creep in. And then all of a sudden, this weekend hits and you're like, oh, wait, okay, no, we still got it. We still got it. We still got the fastball.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of what, really stood out to me, just based off of what I heard and what I read about just everything that happened this weekend and everything that the coaches, the coaches did, the players interacting with the recruits.
Yep.
It was a lot of that. I think they did a really good job of putting their best foot forward and showing that the Clemson family talk isn't just talk. It's not, a lot of programs sell family, but at Clemson, it really is a really unique culture, and they walk the walk, and they certainly did that this weekend.
They absolutely no.
Go ahead.
I said they absolutely do. Like it's, we hear it all the time, and it's kind of like you hear like, oh, it's a family atmosphere there, and you get the eye roll because you hear it. You don't just hear with Clemson, you hear with so many programs out there. But it's like I was mentioning before the show, right? Like, I mean, at this point, there's got to be something behind it, right? Like all these recruits don't just echo this stuff, and it's not genuine. You hear it from players that are at Clemson. You hear it from former players that have long since had NFL careers and come back, that are still in the NFL and active. You hear it. So I think Clemson does a very good job of being genuine and true to who they are. And it's just a different atmosphere at Clemson, right? Like, I mean, if you bring somebody to Clemson that has never been there before, it's a very unique place. It's a unique experience when you go there, from just the scenery and kind of the hills and the stadium, and you go there on a big Saturday for football, and it's a crazy environment. And I think it still sells in recruiting. I think. And then you talk about there's fresh blood in the coaching staff, right? You got a Matt Luke, you got a Chris Rump, you got a Garrett Riley that has been brought in. So there's been this injection of new blood and new ideas and new philosophies in the program the past couple of years. And I think it's really starting to show dividends in the fact that it feels like this program's being somewhat rejuvenated, whereas it started to feel somewhat stale, right? With the coaching staff that was there for so long, and no fault to their own. I'm not making a dig at them at all, but sometimes an injection of new people and new ideas and new philosophies can really rejuvenate a program. And I really think that's what's going on at Clemson right now.
100%, man. And I want to start, with kind of getting into the specifics, because we've just been kind of talking about, the general feel that we've gotten out of this weekend. But I really want to start with the position that I think was probably the most emphasized this weekend, and that was certainly the offensive line. I think Clemson, the hire of Matt Luke, I think it has been something that's been understated, and we've talked about it, just throughout this offseason, how little attention it got, like pretty much after it happened. And I don't think a lot of people realize how big of a hire it was. But I mean, I think he really got to show his stuff this weekend. Matt Luke did, and his recruiting prowess made an impression on a lot of these guys. And I think, and obviously, one of them just committed today, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But I want to start with the guy that every Clemson fan is thinking about. Everybody is kind of talking about the highest profile, player on campus this past weekend, and that's David Sanders. I mean, I think the weekend just reinforced everything that David Sanders and his family loves about Clemson. I don't think that this means that he's about to commit or anything like that.
Yeah.
He still plans to take his official visits, and I know that's something that Clemson fans are kind of worried about, and I mean, honestly, understandably so. But I think Clemson did reinforce their positioning as far as where they stand in the pecking order. I think they are very much one of those teams that has a really good shot at landing him. And I think, like I said, this weekend, I think a lot of what happened this weekend just kind of reinforced everything that they kind of got to know as he visited, in the past couple of months, and now he really got to see all of it in action. All the coaches, they spent a lot of time with him. Like he had multiple coaches with him at all times, and so they really did put on the full court press and kind of let him know that, hey, you're the guy, you're the guy in this class. And so I think they did a really good job. I think his family is going to take it all in, and they're going to come to a decision after he's gone through his official visits, and he's going to continue on his timeline. But I think Clemson will be one of those teams at the finish line that has a really good shot at landing him. And I think, you still got to watch out for Ohio State. Still got to watch out for Tennessee. Georgia's hanging around there as well. But I think Clemson has positioned themselves well. So we'll kind of see how it plays out in the coming months. Well, in the coming month. But I like where Clemson sits, and it's really just about, I think they've done all they can as far as putting their best foot forward and letting him know what a priority he is and what he means to this staff, this program. And so we'll kind of see whether that ultimately sways him in Clemson's direction. But like I said, there's a lot of factors that are going on in this decision. Clemson does have the proximity and the familiarity advantage, and Tennessee as well to a degree. But Ohio State, they also, they have a big stick on the recruiting trail right now. For reasons that you can probably deduce. And so that's a tough pull. I mean, it's when you're a 17-year-old kid, like, those are 16, 17-year-old kid, those are things that, it could be life-changing. So,
100%.
Although David Sanders is a guy that, has said throughout the process that, proximity and staying closer to home is a big deal. Sometimes there are ways to circumvent that and make him change his mind a little bit. So we'll see how that kind of plays out as he continues to take these official visits. Another guy I wanted to hit on is Massachusetts offensive lineman Hardy Watts. 6'5", 300 pounds, like almost as big as Rowan Byrne, who we'll talk about later. I think Clemson did a fantastic job with him. I think I think Clemson, if I really had to say, I'd say they lead right now. They still have to contend with Michigan, who obviously has a pedigree putting offensive linemen in the league right now. But again, their head coach just left, and that's kind of that's a selling point in Clemson's favor. The stability and obviously the new hire of Matt Luke and his track record certainly helps as well. And so Hardy Watts is a name that I think all Clemson fans should know and kind of keep an eye on. Nasty offensive lineman. Just he's huge, first of all, but he plays with so much violence. Like it's kind of scary. Like when you put on his tape, like, and I think that's kind of, you're seeing the shift in philosophy with Matt Luke as far as just the sheer size of the guys they're recruiting this go around. And kind of trying to remold and reshape the build of this offensive line group. Did you have any like sort of thoughts about kind of how this offensive line board is shaping out? Whether it's about David Sanders, Rowan Byrne, Hardy Watts, and Max Buchanan, and a couple other names. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think, look, man, at the end of the day, you are, as you stated previously, you're starting to see Matt Luke work, right? Like, you're starting to see why it was such a huge deal when Clemson was able to pluck Matt Luke out of retirement and bring him into Clemson as the offensive line coach. And as he stated, he's not really interested in getting back into head coaching or anything like that. So that could mean that Clemson has this guy for a long time. And you're starting to see his recruiting prowess. You hit on David Sanders. I think Clemson made an amazing push for David Sanders this weekend. I think they did about as well as they possibly could have done. They did everything that you could want them to do. Now the ball's in David Sanders' court, right? I think they reminded David Sanders of why he's considering Clemson, right? Why Clemson would be a good decision for him to commit and play the next 3 to 4 years of his college career, right? I think they reminded him of just how special of a place Clemson is. And, oh, by the way, we have Matt Luke, who has a proven track record now of producing elite level offensive linemen and getting them into the NFL, not only just getting them drafted in the NFL, but getting them drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, right? So he's got a proven track record of that. I think you pushed for him really well. You mentioned the landmines that are out there for David Sanders. Sometimes you can't say no when the money's big enough, and he will have money thrown his way. But at the end of the day, if you're a Clemson fan, you really can't worry about that. You already know Clemson is not going to get into this bidding war over David Sanders. They want him. They're just not going to do that. But I think that Clemson fans can rest assured, not that he's going to commit to Clemson at all. That's not what I'm saying. But rest assured that everything that could possibly be done to convince him that Clemson is the place for him was done this past weekend. And he now has to make that decision for himself when he goes to Tennessee, Ohio State, and these other official visits that he's got scheduled. This offensive line recruiting class is really shaping up really nice. It's you're seeing the pieces really come together. You're seeing guys come to Clemson for official visits now, not committed yet or anything like that, but you're seeing guys come to Clemson that a year ago, 2 years ago would have never given Clemson an official visit. They just wouldn't have, right? Because of a lot of different reasons. And Matt Luke being probably one of the biggest reasons right now, right? So I just think you could see the push. We went over the list last week of all the offensive linemen that were going to be in town. And I think if you're a Clemson fan right now, you have to be excited with the shift that we are starting to see along the offensive line and be excited for the future and what I expect Matt Luke to be able to create as the Clemson offensive line coach. I think it's going to be special.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I think you're starting to see some of the groundwork being laid for the 26 class as well. They of course, after the weekend they had they had their annual camp that they have, and a lot of 26 offers came out, and Matt Luke has laid the groundwork for several guys, for this upcoming class. So I think you're starting to see the foundation being built, and this 25 class is the beginning of it. And I think it's only up from here, especially if Clemson puts a good product on the field, this year, especially as far as offensive line is concerned. I think you're going to start seeing that track record start to build, and that trust and the attractiveness of being an offensive lineman at Clemson starting to rise. So really exciting stuff. And that was kind of the point of emphasis this weekend. But I want to hit the other side of the ball real quick. Clemson has already nabbed a couple really big time commits. A few really big time commits this cycle already along the defensive line, and Ari Watford, Isaiah Campbell, and Amari Adams. But they're still looking for that final piece on the edge, and potentially, one more defensive tackle. We'll see. And so I wanted to hit on the two guys, the two guys that were on campus, Bryce Davis and Christian Garrett. Unsurprisingly, these are two guys that are heavily being recruited by Georgia as well. And Clemson is going head to head with Georgia for both of them. I think they gave Bryce Davis a lot to think about this weekend. And I don't know. I don't want to say the pendulum has swung in Clemson's direction, but I'm close to it. I really like where they sit, and I think there's a lot of pull from him as far as what Clemson offers especially from a scheme standpoint. This is a big deal, and I think he would be a massive add. Of course, Bryce Davis is at Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. If that high school name sounds familiar, that's the same high school that Travis Shaw went to, and multiple other guys that didn't end up at Clemson, and some that did end up at Clemson. And so they're trying to kind of get that pipeline back and kind of get more of a foothold at that, especially that region of North Carolina and that high school in particular, because they churn out NFL talent, year after year. And I think landing Bryce Davis would be massive for this defensive line class, and I think the ball is in Bryce Davis's court, and the same goes for Christian Garrett as well. And so I really think that Clemson is in a good shape to land. I think they'll land at least one of them if I had to guess, but we'll kind of see how it plays out. But I thought they did it. Nick Eason and Chris Rumpf, the duo, the tag team punch, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's tough to stop, man. And when you get them in an official visits setting where they can really work on a recruit, yeah, man, it's nothing like it. So, and that's the other hire that also didn't get a ton of attention, but really should have was Chris Rumpf.
Yeah.
And you really have just a recruiting monster, two-headed monster, at least at defensive line with Nick Eason and Chris Rumpf. And so Bryce Davis, Christian Garrett, thought I wanted to throw those names out there. I think Clemson did put their best foot forward with both of them, and wouldn't be surprised if they landed, at least one of them. And I mean, that would be a massive win over Georgia, who obviously is not very easy to win recruiting battles against these days. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, they're a tough one to win against for sure. But I tell you what, they have a formidable foe, not only in Clemson and the weight that Tiger Paw still carries around the country, but I mean, you mentioned a Nick Eason and a Chris Rumpf. I mean, what a recruiting duo, man! Like being in that room, being inside of that room when they're recruiting guys must be absolutely insane. I mean, everybody knows Nick Eason. I mean, the dude's got such an infectious attitude and personality. I mean, this is the dude that strapped on a helmet and put cleats on and went through mat drills with his defensive line, which is absolutely insane. And then Chris Rumpf still getting his feet wet at Clemson, but obviously with all of his experience in the NFL and the connections that he has, I mean, what a duo. Can't wait to see them just blossom together as a defensive line duo, and they're going to bring in some big time recruits as Nick Eason already has been doing since his time at Clemson.
Absolutely, man. Big stuff. And landing one, it'd be great if you could land both of them, but landing just one of them would be a nice bow on your defensive line class, which is already really, really strong right now. And with that being said, a couple other positions I wanted to hit on. Wide receiver. They had two wide receivers on campus over the weekend. 4-star receiver Cortez Mills and 4-star receiver Samari Reed. I think the ball is, to continue to beat that expression to death. I think the ball is in Cortez Mills' court. I thought they did a phenomenal job. I think there's a lot of I thought his visit went extremely well, and you're mainly battling in-state Miami for his services. I think Clemson may have kind of shifted the momentum in that recruitment. We'll see, but they gave Cortez Mills a lot to think about, and we'll see whether the pull from the in-state school and maybe the monetary advantages that he may get end up swaying him and keeping him in state. But I think there was a lot to like about Clemson, and would not be surprised if he ended up in the class. And then linebacker, and there's only one linebacker. Clemson is only taking one linebacker, one more linebacker, and Kamar Archie is the guy that they've zeroed in on. He was the only linebacker on the official visit weekend. That was definitely on purpose. Made it, it's like, hey, we're ready when you are. And so we'll kind of see whether that ultimately pays dividends. But I think Clemson is certainly in the driver's seat right now. But they still have to battle, a couple of other schools, Michigan included. But I like where Clemson sits right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Cortez Mills for sure that's a big one for Clemson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's seen, the wide receiver recruiting, especially last cycle, with Brian Wesco and TJ Moore, bringing in those guys was huge. And you can see the projections for those guys already this season. And Cortez Mills, we just need to keep that ball rolling, right? And Cortez Mills, I think, is that guy that can definitely do that for the Tigers. And hopefully he decides to shut it down soon and officially become a verbal commit for the Clemson Tigers.
Absolutely. And I think that'll wrap it up for kind of the overview. Those are some of the guys I wanted to point out, and there are others. But if I spent time on every single guy that visited Clemson over the weekend, we'd be here a really long time. And I want to get to some of you guys' questions. And if you have a question about a particular player that I didn't mention, then which I've already started a couple, then we'll hit on those as well. But I want to actually hit on the guys that decided to go ahead and bite the bullet. And it's probably not the right expression to use because it sounds kind of negative, but go ahead and pull the trigger. That's probably the better expression. And announce their commitments to Clemson over the last couple of days. And I want to start with the commit from yesterday, and 4-star cornerback Graceson Littleton. TPC, how did you like see it when it happened, or did you find out later? Okay, he might be preoccupied, so never mind.
No, I got you. I'm sorry, Jordan. What'd you say?
Oh, I said, when he announced his commitment yesterday, did you see it when it happened, or did you find out later?
I did not find out until later. I was busy at work, but when I officially saw it, these two commits for Clemson, I think it's pretty big time. We're starting out with Graceson.
Yeah, Graceson.
Yeah, Graceson Littleton. I think it's a huge recruit for Clemson. He measures in 6 foot, 180 pounds. We were talking about it before the show started about, his track-like speed that he's a physical guy. He likes press coverage. And I was kind of to be honest, I was a little worried because, as you know, last season, right out of the official visit weekend, it was, we kind of hit the ground running. And we had commit after commit after commit immediately following that official visit weekend. And it kind of felt like, things were moving much slower this year. And they kind of have in some ways, but I think you're starting to see the gradual progression and the dividends being paid from the official visit weekend. And he was obviously the guy that pulled the pulled the trigger first. He was the guy, that kind of got the ball rolling out of the official visit weekend. A guy out of Florida. I already said, big time track speed, 4.4 40 in the Under Armour camp this past summer in Orlando, I think it was. And obviously, I think he's going to be a big time player for the Tigers.
Absolutely, man. And Mike Reed continues to cook. I mean, and I think one of the notable things is obviously he's from the state of Florida, the Tampa area. And Clemson has certainly gotten their fair share of guys out of that region. And it was kind of dry, like the past few years. It was kind of dry from that perspective. And you're seeing that pipeline come back, obviously with TJ Moore committing last cycle, and now Graceson Littleton. It's massive pickup. Clemson was only planning to take one corner, and I think they got the best one on their board, really. And Mike Reed continues to get guys that are rangy, can run, like you said, legit track speed. Just ran a 4.41, and so I think as a high schooler, that's extremely difficult to do, even if you're really gifted. I mean, there's a lot of most high school kids don't run the 40 with that kind of technique, and obviously the track background certainly helps a ton, and so he's been well trained in that. But yeah, he's got legit speed, and I think he's going to fit in nicely into this cornerback room. And great take for if you're only going to take one corner. He's certainly one that certainly fits the bill. And Mike, like I said, Mike Reed continues to cook. It's like at this point, you just, you don't even question, the take, because you just know that you just feel really confident that player is going to pan out. And it's happened so many times over the years. And so, welcome to Clemson, Graceson Littleton, and, really excited to get him on campus and join this already talented cornerback room.
Yeah, I mean, look,
right at that position.
You're 100% correct with the Mike Reed take. Like, whatever guy he wants to bring in with Clemson, whatever guy he evaluates and he thinks is the proper fit for this cornerback position and this defensive back group, I got 100% faith and trust in him. The guy just doesn't miss. I mean, he goes and gets guys and develops them, and they become superstars when they were never supposed to be. So Mike Reed and his track record at Clemson and his ability to develop these guys once they get on campus, I think the sky's the limit for Graceson. I think he's going to be really good, and welcome to Clemson to him, and glad he was the one that kind of got it kicked off after the official visit weekend. He makes he makes for a great addition to that defensive back class. We now have 13 verbal commits in the class. I think we're number 3 ranked in the 247 composite. So, I mean, we won't stay there by the end of the recruiting cycle, and I can assure you that. But it speaks to the quality of recruit that Clemson has already verbally committed for the 2025 class, and the ball's just starting to get rolling for this summer and where the recruiting's going to go leading up to December and the early signing period.
Absolutely. And of course, as the saying goes, good things come in twos. And of course, today, following Graceson Littleton's commitment, Clemson did get a commitment from 4-star offensive tackle Rowan Byrne out of New York. This is a really, really kind of just another one of those, takes that you look at him and you're like, oh my God, like this kid is massive. And you turn on the tape and it's the exact same. He plays to his size, let's say. And you're starting to see kind of the shift from a philosophy standpoint from Matt Luke and what Clemson wants to be at the position. Rowan Byrne was a late ad, and I forgot to mention Graceson Littleton as well. Both of these guys were were late additions to the official visit weekend, and they had to get extensions due to schedule conflict. So they were here after technically the official visit weekend had ended, and they were here into the middle of the week. And they both just really enjoyed their visit, and they felt like it was the time. And they both of them had official visits lined up. Rowan Byrne had Penn State and Michigan, and those in a couple of other programs lined up. Florida State, forgot to mention. And Graceson Littleton had Alabama on the docket, and Penn State again. And so it was a really massive deal that they both decided to shut their recruitments down. And so Rowan Byrne, as we mentioned, he's 6'6", 300 pounds. His wingspan, I think, is like 6'10". So he has like legitimate tackle length. Like you can slide him out at tackle, and I think that's where he'll be to start. But he has the versatility to play inside because of his size. And so I think he brings you a lot of positional versatility. And I think that is something that they really want as well. Because, Clemson in the past, they recruited guys that, had positional versatility, but you sacrificed, size and play strength to get it. But they're not doing that anymore. They're getting guys that are big and can move and play at multiple different spots. And Rowan Byrne certainly fits that billing. And so really excited to have him in the class. I think he's a guy that, the star rating is not going to jump off the page to you, if you, depending on what site you look on. But I think this is a blue chip prospect that you just got. And another great addition to an already strong offensive line class. I mean, we're talking about, David Sanders and how big he would be to add to the class. But I think Clemson is already, they already have a really good foundation as far as this offensive line class is concerned with Braden Jacobs and Easton Ware. You're going to be able to, work with, this and continue, and some of the other guys, that are still on the board. So, I don't think all is lost if you don't land David Sanders, because you've done such a good job with some of these other guys. And welcome to Clemson, Rowan Byrne. Really, really massive get. And just another situation where Matt Luke just kind of worked his magic, because this was a recruitment that, we weren't sure how, where it was going to go, but getting them, it just shows you what happens when you get these guys on campus and get them in the Clemson, enveloped in the Clemson culture.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Look, it shows Clemson's ability to sell itself, right? Clemson does a very good job, as we stated earlier in the video, of really structuring the way that they do these official visits and how they go about it. And you mentioned that these two guys were kind of late adds to the weekend due to scheduling issues, which shows Clemson's how bad Clemson wanted these two guys, right? Because they don't tend to flex a lot when it comes to the official recruiting weekend during the summer. It's kind of one of those things, you make it or you don't. You want to be here or you don't want to be here. But they flexed a little bit for these two guys, and clearly it paid huge dividends for this recruiting class, right? You get verbal commits out of both of them. They're both huge additions to their respective position groups, and then overall the recruiting class. I mean, you think about a guy and Rowan Byrne. I mean, this dude, you talk about his size. That's kind of the first thing that kind of jumps off the page or jumps off the screen as you're watching this film, is just this guy's size. But he's athletic. His ability to get out on the edge and pick up linebackers and pick up secondary personnel in the blocking scheme is really good. He runs a similar style of offense in high school to what Garrett Riley runs at Clemson now. So I think the kind of learning curve for the playbook may be a little bit easier for a guy like this. You talk about, he's a guy that you could really see play all five positions. Clearly, they have him projected as a tackle. He's going to start there. but he's athletic enough. He could play all positions. You talk about his wingspan, a nasty run blocker. He's a guy that finishes the run blocks. He likes being physical. He likes getting out in space and making plays out there as well. So really excited about a guy like Byrne. Another big addition to that offensive line group, and you can just see the foundation being set by Matt Luke, and he's definitely not done yet.
No, he is not. No, he's not. And, just got to continue to let him cook. And, I think good things are going to happen for Clemson in this recruiting cycle, at that position.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. It's definitely trending in a very favorable direction for Clemson. I can't wait to see what this offensive line group looks like in, let's say 2 years, when Matt Luke really has a chance to not only develop the guys that are already on the roster, because let's not forget Clemson has some really elite talent at the offensive line position already currently on the roster. But when he starts adding some more guys through recruiting and getting these guys spun up, I think he's going to turn Clemson into a really special offensive line group. And it's something that me and you have both talked about, on several shows, about how badly we want Clemson to be that destination spot for offensive linemen, because there's really no reason that we shouldn't be. With the style of ball that we play and the location and the recruiting grounds that we consistently recruit out of, we should have elite offensive line play. And I think Matt Luke is going to turn that around in short order.
You nailed it, man. It really, the woes at that position have just kind of been mind-boggling. Just when you look at it especially from an outsider perspective, you're like, what is it about Clemson that why they haven't been successful along the offensive line? And so, I think we're starting to see that slowly change, and we'll see kind of what happens. This season, I think there's a lot to work with, a lot of talent to work with already on the roster. And so if you have a strong year, the perception is totally different, because Clemson certainly has been a victim of negative recruiting at this position for a really long time, because you just didn't have a track record of putting a lot of guys in the league. And, unfortunately, that's kind of the reality. I mean, every program does it. That's kind of the name of the game. Any kind of negative you can point out about a competing school, you're going to do it. And Clemson has certainly been a victim of that over the years for a lot of big time guys that they were after. But you start to change the narrative this season, and then things obviously they look a little bit different. All right, I think that's going to do it for kind of our official visit weekend recap. We talked about the commits, so I kind of want to get to you guys' questions. Anything that you wanted mentioned. Tiggs asks, any thoughts on Bryce Davis? Will Clemson win out with him? I think Clemson's in a really good a really good position too. And I think Georgia, the pull of Georgia obviously is still going to be there, but I think there's a lot about Clemson that Bryce is really drawn to, and you gotta hope that wins out. But I think Clemson did really give him a lot to consider this weekend. And we'll kind of see what happens in the coming weeks. Dylan asks, are we still in on Chauncey Gooden, or now going after Mario Nash Jr.? Yeah, Chauncey Gooden, that recruitment has kind of waned over the past couple of months. And it's not really because of it. Both parties aren't interested. I just there are guys that were higher on Clemson's board, and that's just kind of that's kind of the name of the game sometimes. And then you mentioned Mario Nash Jr., who was on campus, this past weekend. They really, really like Mario Nash. But I think, with the spots that are left and his kind of personal timeline for where, when he wants to make a decision and all that, I don't think there's a whole lot of matching up there. So I think that's kind of the biggest obstacle is kind of his recruiting timeline and the spots that are left. It's probably not. I wouldn't expect it to work out. So we'll see. Anything can happen. But I know that Clemson doesn't view him as a oversign worthy player. There was really only one on the offensive line, and of course that's David Sanders. So if spots fill up, that's just kind of and Mario Nash decides he still wants to go through the process, which is perfectly fine. But Clemson has its own timeline, and if those don't match, that's kind of just it is what it is. John asks, anyone speak to Christian Garrett after his visit? I haven't seen anything on the internet. Not that I know of. But everything that I saw said that he had a really great visit. There haven't been quotes or anything. So I guess we'll have to see. But I'm not really sure about that. I certainly didn't see anything either. So kind of see.
No, I didn't see anything from him, but sometimes it takes a minute for these guys to, for the various writers to kind of get an interview with them and get it scheduled and get some real quotable information written down from how they saw their visit and what they thought about it and what kind of time they had, but some of these guys, it's just, they're going to say, a lot of the same stuff coming out of each and every visit. So some of it's kind of hard to read as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's some of these guys are really, and it's different with every kid. Like some kids like may not be super, forthcoming about, kind of their experience, beyond, surface level stuff. And some players are gush, but and really let you know how much they loved it. And neither is necessarily an indicator that they're going to commit to Clemson or not. It's just really about how each individual recruit and their family as well wants to go about handling media and all that. Because some guys just like to keep things under wraps and they don't want to show their hand too much. Others are brutal or really honest and really excited to share kind of what their thoughts are to the media. So it's kind of it's different with every kid for sure.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's them being methodical and kind of going about things a different way. Sometimes it's just personality. Some kids aren't super into talking to every single media member and taking a bunch of interviews. Some of these kids like to kind of keep to themselves, and it just depends.
Absolutely. Dylan asks, is Grayson as fast as Nate Wiggins? Not that fast, I wouldn't say, but he's got elite speed. But Nate Wiggins is one of one, almost one of one, as far as that kind of speed is concerned. Like Nate Wiggins is one of the fastest football players I've ever seen. So it would be kind of a saying he's not as fast as Nate Wiggins certainly doesn't mean he's slow. He's really, really fast, but you'd
be hard pressed to find a guy as fast as Nate Wiggins on a football field. Now, if you're talking 40 times and racing on a track, maybe there's guys out there that beat him. But I'm telling you, if you've watched Nate Wiggins play football with helmets and pads on, you'd be hard pressed to find a guy that is faster than him on a football field. I mean, you can think back not too far and just see play after play of him just chasing down somebody that's breaking it for a long run or a long pass or whatever. And I mean, his closing speed was ridiculous. So, little unfair to kind of compare to Nate Wiggins. That's a tough ask.
Yeah, very much so, for sure. Dylan also asks, is Rowan Byrne more versatile and a better player than Jalen Beckley? I certainly like Rowan as a prospect a little bit better than Jalen Beckley. Just I would say so. Yeah. I mean, both players are you know really large, but I think Rowan Byrne. I think he showed a lot more play strength on his tape. I thought he looked just more physically imposing. Compared to his size, like I thought he played up to it more just based on his film. Um, so yeah, I like this take a good bit. Um, He also asks, is Braden Jacobs still taking official visits? No. There is a rumor that he may flip to Georgia. Well, I certainly haven't heard that. But, anything can happen in recruiting, but have heard no indication otherwise. Him and his father, especially, has been really, really active on social media and really enthusiastic. I would be shocked if anything, were to change. Braden really loves Clemson, and his family loves Clemson. I don't see I don't see that happening.
Yeah, let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not. But again, anything can happen in recruiting, and Clemson has not been is no they're not immune to guys flipping and all that. It certainly happened over the years, but I haven't heard any indication that he's wavering or wanting to do anything different. And if he was if he was announcing official visits, then we would know, okay, yeah, it's over, because obviously we know that Clemson doesn't allow their commits to take official visits. So
Right. Yeah. At that point, the offer gets pulled, or he relinquishes his verbal commitment to Clemson.
right.
Clemson does not allow their recruits to. I mean, everybody knows that who's listening to this, but Clemson does not allow their recruits to take any visits to any other schools after they verbally commit. So, I think that's a rock solid commitment. You mentioned we're not. It's we're no stranger to commits flipping and ending up somewhere else, especially still this early in the game. But it doesn't happen too terribly often at Clemson. Typically, when we get a verbal commit, it sticks for the most part.
Yeah.
We got a high percentage of guys that end up signing, and a very low percentage of guys that end up going elsewhere and flipping to another school. So that doesn't mean it will happen, but I still feel really good about him signing with Clemson.
Yeah, definitely. John asks, what's your thought on Clemson offering 3 wide receivers for 2026 already, but still no quarterback? Past 4 or 5 cycles, quarterback was one of the first. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. But, I think it's one of those situations where they are fully giving the reins to Garrett Riley as far as his quarterback and what he wants. And so, he got a chance to evaluate, 4 or 5, more like 3 at camp. They really like DJ Bordeaux. Tate Reynolds is a guy that they've been on for a while. We'll see who they end up landing on. I think that's an evaluation that's still undergoing, so we'll kind of see how that plays out. I personally hope it's DJ Bordeaux just from what I've seen from those guys. I think he's the best prospect for sure. Live arm, really, really great athlete, just kind of everything you want. And he would fit, the system certainly. So I hope it's him, but Tate Reynolds there's a lot to like about Tate Reynolds as well. I'm blanking on the third kid's name. But yeah, it's different, but I think it's kind of more of a reflection of kind of how they're letting Garrett Riley really take the reins on what direction they want to go from a quarterback standpoint. And I mean, I think that's what you should do. I mean, he's the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator. And if you want to have success, that's kind of you want a guy that your coordinator feels comfortable with and feels like can be successful. So, it's certainly different. And they've kind of gone about this cycle, this 2026 cycle, really differently in a lot of ways. They haven't offered a ton of offense. Most of the guys that they've offered are defensive guys. Logan Anderson, Thomas Davis Jr. We're kind of seeing how the board is shaking out, but we're still like really long ways away from all of that, and a lot can change between now and next year. All right. Moving on from recruiting, but kind of tangent to the offensive line talk. Jay asks, can you name one breakout offensive lineman currently on the roster we may be talking about more in the next 2 to 3 years? Okay. Currently on the roster that we're talking about in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm going to go with it's a really good question. I'm going to go with Mason Wade. I'm going to say Mason Wade. I think it's easy to just, if we're talking 2 to 3 years, then that probably is a freshman. I think I like Mason Wade. I like Mason Wade a good bit, coming out of high school. And he was kind of just a guy that flew under the radar, but I thought he was a great late take. And, I think he's going to end up paying off for you. And he was a guy that was, basically a surefire Virginia Tech kid until the offer came. And I just think he's a guy that flew under the radar that I think is going to be a starter in a few seasons. So I'm gonna go with Mason Wade. TPC, do you have a guy that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think I'll go with our lone offensive line commit out of last summer, Ronan O'Connell. I think a guy that we haven't really talked about very much since he committed. He came in, he's been injured and kind of working back from an injury in high school, but a guy that if you watch his tape is, he's a pretty physical guy. He's a guy that I think Matt Luke will be able to develop and do a lot with. And, with the addition of a Matt Luke, you got to be excited to see what he's going to do with a guy that has the size and ability of Ronan O'Connell. So I'll go with him.
Absolutely. And that's really not because I like the guys we brought in this past cycle. Elijah Thurman is a guy that's already turning some heads. I think we'll be talking about him a lot pretty soon as well. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't the offensive line haul that Clemson fans wanted last season for a lot of reasons. But I don't think that it was like a complete wash because you missed on your top guys. I thought they did a good job of managing it. And you mentioned Ronan O'Connell. He's nasty and kind of fits the mold of the guys they're recruiting now. So he certainly is a guy that I think Matt Luke will like a ton, and I could totally see him being a starter and a big time contributor in a couple of seasons. Tiggs asks, will Banks Pope get more playing time this year? I would think so, probably primarily on special teams. I don't expect him to be a massive part of the offense, just because I think there's just a lot of guys in that tight end room that I think obviously just give you a little bit more from an upside standpoint. I mean, he's a great walk on, and he's done a lot of work, and he made some plays, and in the spring game and all that. So that was cool to see. But I imagine he'd be primarily special teams this year, but certainly get more snaps for sure.
Yeah, definitely more of a special teams guy. I mean, and it's no dig against him. There's just,
mean, you look at that tight end room. I mean, there's a lot of big, athletic guys in front of him that can just just fit the mold better and can go out there and kind of be more of a matchup nightmare for defenses. So, but he's definitely contributed to Clemson and definitely carved out a nice little role for himself on special teams and in the sparing snaps that he gets on offense. He's a guy that's going to go out there and give you 100%, and you never doubt that guy's out there giving you his all. And guys like that, especially on special teams. I mean, I know it's not something that we talk about very often, and fans don't really necessarily follow the special teams and who gets all the snaps over there. But I mean, it truly is a big part of the game, and you need guys like that are out there and really going and giving their all, because that's majority of where their snaps are coming from.
Absolutely. Before we move on to another question, just another reminder: if you haven't already, we're hitting the 110 mark. We've covered a lot, but I just wanted to remind you guys to please hit that like button if you haven't already. We've got 32 in here now. We had less at the start of the show, so if you haven't, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Obviously, we do this show every Thursday at 8 p.m. So if you always you can set your notifications, hit that bell, and set it to all, so that way it actually notifies you. Because I know sometimes when you just click it and it's set to personalized, it doesn't always notify everything. So please do that, and feel free again to check out the links in the description. The link to the Patreon is there. The link to the Amazon code. It's really simple. There's no extra payment. You click the link, shop on Amazon like you normally would, and the Voice of College Football gets a little bit of kickback, and it helps support the channel. So really easy way to help the channel, really without even spending any extra money. So make sure to, if you want to support us in that way, that's a great thing, and it's greatly appreciated. Of course, feel free to check out our other team channels. We have a ton, that the Voice of College Football is constantly churning out content, a lot of great stuff. The Michigan channel has a show going on, I think right now. So feel free to check them out when this is over, and give them a like as well. John and crew, they do a great job, and they help support us as well. So kind of show the love back, if you will. All right. John asks, where do you put the odds on Luke getting Dietrich Pennington out of hibernation? I'm guessing 50-50 at best. It's hard to put odds on it, and it's because it really is one of those things where you have to be in the mind of a player. And a lot of the things that have barred Dietrich Pennington from playing, I mean, a lot of it was certainly physical. He needed to be in better shape, but a lot of that also comes from a mental standpoint, and just, is he mentally ready to be out there and play? Can he give you those minutes? And I just or snaps, and I don't know. I think 50-50 is probably the default, because you just don't really know. But we've talked about it before, how this offensive line group has responded to Matt Luke and kind of his coaching style in a really positive way. And Dietrich Pennington is a guy they really want to get up to speed, because even if he's not a starter, I mean, he would be massive if you could plug him in when needed, whether it's injury or whatever, and give you playable snaps, because right now he just hasn't been able to do that. So I don't know. It's still up in the air, but it's one of those things where now he's one of the more experienced, not more experienced, but one of the older guys in the room, and it's one of those things where you're like, well, it's kind of time to kind of kick it into gear, because pretty soon, you already have a lot of young guys that are turning heads in that offensive line group, and pretty soon it's going to be filled with even more that are looking to take his spot. And when you're one of those veterans that's just hasn't played a bunch, it's really easy to kind of get swept by the wayside, because there's just a lot of younger talent coming in that, quite frankly, are just there's a lot more upside in playing them than you. So that's kind of the situation he's in now. And so it's time. You got to start showing something.
I think it'll be a lot easier to answer that question when we get a look at him at the beginning of fall camp after this summer. You know what I'm saying? You got a guy like Matt Luke that came in. It's sort of a fresh start for a guy like Dietrich Pennington, who obviously his struggles at Clemson with being in the proper shape and his development have been well documented. And sometimes a change in coaching can sometimes motivate some of those guys. And he's obviously a guy that Clemson thought a lot of when they brought him in. He still has the talent and the ability to become a really special offensive lineman for Clemson, but he's got to be willing to put in the work, right? He's got to be willing to do what is necessary in order to get his body in a place where he can contribute consistently on the field, and then get his mentality and his mental state in a place where he's understanding the plays and the playbook and where he needs to be and the reads that he needs to make in game. So I think there's a lot of stuff still up in the air with Dietrich Pennington, but there's still a lot of talent there, and there's still a lot of reason to be maybe cautiously optimistic on him turning it around. And I'm sure that Matt Luke had some candid conversations in the exit meetings heading out of spring, and probably gave him his marching orders and what he would like to see him improve on this summer. And we'll see where he is, at least from a body composition standpoint, when they do the weigh-ins for fall camp. And I'll be excited to see where a guy like Dietrich Pennington stands when that time comes. And I think that'll tell us a lot going
Absolutely.
forward.
Yeah, we'll definitely
where his mentality is, and if he's going to turn that corner. Because I think if he's going to, it's got to be this summer, right?
Yeah, certainly. And we'll know more for sure when that time rolls around, and kind of what the pecking order is like. I mean, we have a good idea of what the starting lineup will look like, just because you return 4 or 5 starters. We'll see what center looks like, and that's something that we'll continue to monitor. But yeah, just kind of the guys behind him, that depth chart behind him, who slots in well, where. I mean, there's a lot of room for upward mobility for several guys, and Dietrich Pennington included. Because if you do get, Dietrich Pennington, he's focused and his body's right and all of that, I mean, he could be really, really good. And we knew that when we got him, but it's just has not come into fruition yet. And so maybe, this coaching change, and coupled with the talent that's being brought in now, maybe that kicks him into gear, and you start to see him start to figure it out. I mean, offensive line is the most developmental position, arguably, in the sport of football. And so sometimes the light bulb clicks on later in their career. Sometimes some guys come in and are just ready to go. It's not always clear. But Dietrich Pennington, his obviously his path to playing time was different than, say, a Harris Sewell or a Blake Miller, guys that came in and they were already ahead of the curve as far as where their body was, and just how playable they were. So we'll see.
Yeah, and we know that offensive line is probably the toughest position group to evaluate when it comes from transitioning from high school to college. And the same can be said when transitioning from college to the NFL. But it's also one of the position groups that they tend to develop the slowest, and they tend to need the most time when it comes to, making that jump from high school to college. So, I still hold out hope for a guy like Dietrich Pennington. I think he can still really be special for Clemson, and he can be a big contributor. But like I said before, we'll know more this fall.
Absolutely. Tiggs asks, okay, let's talk special teams for a minute. Any kickers in camp this year? So, of course, Clemson has 2 scholarship kickers right now, and Robert Gunn, who is going into his second season, and the true freshman Nolan Hooser. Those two have kind of been going back and forth. It's been a battle for the starting kicking duties. We know what the kicking situation for Clemson was like last year, and how it just wasn't viable, and it cost you in a lot of points last season, and that obviously needs to be different. So it's still a work in progress from everything that the coaching staff has said, and that's certainly not encouraging, but these guys do have talent. Robert Gunn was both of these guys were top 2 or 3 kickers in their class. Robert Gunn, I think, was the number 1 kicker in his class. And he just last season, it didn't click for him, and he got caught up in the moment, and there were some confidence issues. And so, it's not always easy for a true freshman kicker to come in and just be lights out right away, even guys that were highly touted. And we've seen, there's past examples at Clemson specifically of kickers that came in that were just frankly not good to start and ended up being, all-time great kickers. Catman was like that when he was here. BT Potter was certainly like that when he first got to Clemson. So it's not always being a kicker is, you think of it as, oh man, all you have to do is kick. I mean, you practice one thing every day, but when you practice and then getting to the game, it's just, you can't simulate it. It's different. And I'm not, making excuses. Robert Gunn certainly had to be better last year. But that's just kind of the reality of the position. It's a high pressure. There's not a whole lot, that goes into it. Obviously not more than, say, being a quarterback or any of the other positions, but the pressure is pretty much every time you go out there is pretty huge, because the success is all on your leg and all on your composure in that moment. And when you have these moments like the end of the Florida State game, obviously that wasn't Robert Gunn, that was Jonathan White's, but it's a different experience than just simulating it in practice. And so that's the thing that that Robert Gunn and Nolan Hooser are going to have to be able to. One of them is going to have to be able to figure that out and work through that. Did I? Oh, okay. Okay. I think Tiger Paw Craven just got home, so I'm gonna remove him and then. Hey, there we go. Welcome back.
Hey, what's up, man?
Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a minute.
I know it's been a minute. I finally made it home. I'm back in my usual setup here, so all systems go here. Thank you for bearing with me, everybody. Jordan, thank you for holding it down. Really do appreciate it. Did a great job.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, so to kind of caveat on what you were saying about the kickers, I mean, like you said, not making excuses for them, but I mean, it is a tough job, man. Like getting out there and the game being on your leg in one moment, and if you step or slip or pull it, like it's all over, right? So I do get the pressure from that standpoint, but you would think at some point one of these highly recruited guys, these highly rated guys out of high school, one of them's got to hit, right? We thought it was going to be Robert Gunn a year ago. Clearly, the moment was too big for him. The pressure was too much, and you had to call in, a guy that wasn't a part of the team anymore, but comes in and becomes a a okay leg for you just to kind of get you through the season. It wasn't an ideal situation, but it's what we had at the time. You would hope that Robert Gunn would take a step forward. You got Nathan Huser there now, and you're hoping that those two guys are pushing each other, right? But at the end of the day, I'm still apprehensive when it comes to Clemson and their kicking situation right now, because what I didn't want to hear heading out of spring practice is kind of what I heard, right? Whereas, both of them are, having their moments, but they're still inconsistent. Nobody's really pulled ahead. I didn't want to hear that nobody had pulled ahead, right?
Yeah.
Similar to kind of the center position for the offensive line heading out of spring. The one thing I didn't want to hear is what I heard exiting spring practice, right? Heading into summer workouts and all that kind of stuff was, oh, they're kind of back and forth. Nobody's really pulled away. I didn't want to hear that, right? I wanted to hear that a guy had really kind of pulled away a bit. And, if it happened today, this would definitely be the guy, no doubt about it, right? But we didn't hear that for either of those two position groups. And we're going to need it this coming fall. And you just got to hope that one of those guys figure it out this summer, right? And have a good fall camp, and the momentum takes them into the season, and they can really flip that switch. You mentioned a couple Clemson kickers in the past that, didn't start off so great and ended up being, legendary Clemson kickers. You mentioned Catanzaro, right? Like a big-time leg for Clemson. Did it in the NFL for a long time as well. So just got to hope that those two guys can, one of them can emerge as the kicker, because the last thing you want to hear is coming out of fall camp is what you heard coming out of spring practice is, we don't really know, they're both doing really good. That's not good. If you hear they're both doing really good, that's not a good sign, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's you want somebody to really take hold of that job. Maybe it is the case where both of them are playable all of a sudden, like they both make significant strides. But when you read through the lines and when it comes to coach speak and stuff like that, usually that means it's like, okay, we don't really have a true starter yet, and that's
right.
That's obviously a problem. Sticking with the special teams theme, John asks, who's your pick for starting punt returner this year? I'm going to go with Tink Kelly. I think they really wanted to get Tyler Brown up to, they really wanted him to be that guy last year. And I just don't. He offered a lot. Like when he gets the ball in his hands, he's electric. Like he can make plays. Like he had a couple. He had several really nice returns last year. But it's just the consistency, catching it, just too many muffs. And of course you had to, you had to move to Hamp Green and just fair catch every punt, because it was better off like fair catching and not really flipping field position than having a back-breaking turnover. So. I think Tink Kelly is a guy that they're really excited about, and and kind of what he could potentially do in special teams. Of course, Antonio Williams has a lot of experience as well, but I wonder, coming off of injury, whether they want to put him in that position again. I don't know. Maybe they do. But I'm gonna go with Tink Kelly, and that's probably not a name that you think of immediately, but just from what I saw. And what the coaching staff has said, and in spring game and throughout practice, they really like Tink Kelly a lot, and I think they want to get him involved in special teams in some way. So I think I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not something that came to my mind immediately, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and I would prefer to see that than to see Tyler Brown back there. Not that I don't think Tyler Brown's capable. I'm sure that he could develop into a really good punt returner that could be super dangerous. We all know what he can do with the ball in his hands. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But having one of your either starting wide receivers or key contributing wide receivers back there for punt return, I think is less than ideal. Just from an injury standpoint, and how much Clemson has struggled in recent seasons with injuries, particularly at the wide receiver position, I'd rather see a guy like Tink Kelly back there. Not that oh, if he gets hurt, it don't matter. I don't mean it in that way, but he's not, he's probably not going to be in the 1 or 2 deep of the wide receiver rotation, right? But he is a guy that has great ability with the ball in his hands. He can make plays. And so I think that would be a great fit for Clemson and the return game.
Yeah. And I think the good thing is you have options there. I saw John mention Cole Turner. We didn't see him a ton in special teams. Like, obviously that's something that, he has to be able to catch the ball consistently first of, so that, I'm not saying we don't know. We just haven't seen it.
He was a guy that kind of crossed my mind just because of his speed, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just his ability to just move quickly. He kind of came to my mind, but then I don't know his ability to stand back there and secure that ball under pressure when defenders are running by you. It's a completely different ball game, man. Like, that is not easy to do. Just focus on that ball when you got guys running full speed at you, and they're waiting to just annihilate you as soon as you touch that ball. So
yeah, absolutely. Another guy, Jay Haynes. I think he's an option that you could put out there.
Absolutely.
I think he's got really nice speed as well. One of the faster players on the team. I'm gonna go with Tink Kelly just because I get the vibe that they really want him involved in special teams in the return game. So it may not end up being correct, but that's kind of my pick. I think that's where that's kind of the vibe I get.
David Wood said, "What about Eazy-E?"
Yeah, David Ajumame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen him. I don't know what his. I mean, that would be a good way to get him involved because I'm not sure how much of a contributor he'll be this year. I think he's a potential redshirt candidate for sure.
Yeah.
So like I don't know if they want. I feel like they don't want to burn his red shirt, and so I just maybe that happens for in the 3 or 4 allotted, however many games it is that you get to play in where you don't burn your red shirt. Maybe he gets involved in special teams there, especially but I don't expect him to be the primary returner. Because I think they'd want to preserve his eligibility. Hunter asked about Samari Reed. Looks like a beast physically. What's his tape like? I mean, really rangy. He's not massive, but he's got really good size and with the ball in the air, just really great ball skills. He's not a burner per se, but really crisp routes and just natural hands. I mean, I like him a lot. I think that the staff. If they really want to land they want to add one more receiver, and he's on the board. He's one of the 2 on the board left. But I think they would lean towards Cortez Mills, and if that doesn't pan out, then we'll see what happens with Samari Reed. But he's certainly has his own timeline, and Penn State is heavily involved with him as well, and a couple of other schools. But I like him a good bit. It's just I don't know how we I don't know like whether the timeline matches up for him to end up in the class. We'll see.
Yeah.
David says, I love the size and length of the offensive lineman that Luke is targeting now, with or without David Sanders. I love the other ones they were recruiting. Yeah, and that's kind of what we were hitting on earlier. I think you have a really good foundation, even if you don't land David Sanders. But obviously, landing David Sanders would be, just that would be the cherry on top, and massive, for a lot of reasons. But it'd be disappointing for sure not to land him, but like it wouldn't be like a devastating towards Clemson's offensive line prospects for the future.
It's not gonna. It's one of those things where it's like it's not gonna shock me if he doesn't commit to Clemson,
right?
But on the other hand, like I believe Clemson has a more than legitimate shot at landing David Sanders.
100%.
and I know a lot has been said about NIL and, him having kind of an NIL person that's working with him and his family and things like that. That doesn't necessarily take Clemson out of the running. It doesn't necessarily mean good things for Clemson either. So you can take that for what it's worth, make your own determination on what all that means. But I think Clemson will offer what they can in NIL, and it'll be probably substantially less than some other universities are going to offer him. But then again, we talked earlier about, kind of the steps that they made and the progress that they made, reminding David Sanders of what Clemson is and why he would be such a good fit there. And, we'll kind of see where it goes there. But I agree with David Smith. You got to love the 3 commits that Clemson already has along the offensive line for 2025. And, to your point, Jordan, David Sanders would just be the cherry on top of what is already a really good class of offensive line commits.
Absolutely. Timothy Green is here. Good to see you, man. He says, what's happening in Clemson fans? How y'all doing? Yeah, good to see you, Timothy. West Virginia fan. Been a great supporter of the show.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you, my man.
Thanks for stopping by.
He says, my pick to win the ACC this year is Clemson. Yeah, you don't got to butter us up. No, we like that pick for sure. We like that a lot. We're not gonna argue.
I like the way you think, Timothy. I like the way you think.
Me too. John says a lot of experts still are picking FSU this year. Not sure they're even studying rosters, just picking based on transfer headcount or something. Yeah, I think, and I don't think it's less about how much transfers for Florida State has brought in, and just really just about how little
non-existent.
Non-existent Clemson's transfer class is. And so I think that's hampered their perception, fair or not. That's kind of, and we've talked about it a ton. It's been really easy to throw out Clemson because they didn't take transfers, but they don't, without really much regard to what Clemson has brought back and a lot of the positives and strengths that this team potentially has. I like the makeup of this roster a lot right now, even without the transfers. I mean, it's not perfect. There's certainly questions, and we've gone over them, but
I
think this team has a chance to be really, really good. And certainly win the ACC and make a playoff. But
there's no doubt. I mean, just looking at the roster alone, that this team should certainly be competing, for an ACC championship. I mean, that's kind of what you should expect just from top to bottom, looking at the roster, looking at the changes that have been made in the coaching staff and just projecting going forward. That's what you should expect. So you should expect to be competing for an ACC title. If you win that, you're ending up in the 12-team playoff, right? So you're back into the playoff. And then, once you get in there, let the chips fall where they may.
Absolutely. SEC Dog says, real question is, when will y'all be calling for Dabo's head? Can't keep firing all the coordinators. Well, I mean, Clemson didn't fire any coordinators this offseason, so, there's that. But no, why would we call for Dabo's head?
I'm not. Look, a lot. I'll just answer the question very frankly. A lot would have to happen for me to be calling for Dabo Swinney's head.
Yeah.
Yes, I know the transfer portal. We've talked about it ad nauseum on this channel. I know NIL. We've talked about Clemson's NIL situation on this channel, about how they use it more for roster retention. Not that they don't use it for recruiting, but the bulk of it is used for roster retention, and then the rest of it is used for recruiting. They're not going to get into bidding wars. But as far as, calling for Dabo's head, not happening. As far as firing coordinators, we only fired one coordinator, and I don't know how long. So,
yeah,
I mean, Clemson's not really in the business of firing coordinators either. They fired one coordinator, that was Brandon Streeter. The coordinator before him, Tony Elliott, left for a head coaching job. The defensive coordinator, Brent Venables, left for a head coaching job.
So
we've only fired one. But, I mean, I guess if we had to fire another one, I would definitely be okay with that before we go calling for Dabo Swinney's head.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I get the question.
Yeah, but it never about – yeah, it's never been about really the coordinators, and I'm not. We could go down this whole rabbit hole about Clemson's coaching staff for the last few years and what the issues actually were, but it has not. There's not been a trend of Dabo firing coordinators. That's just never been the case. Let me see. I like this question from Jay, and kind of hitting on the Georgia piece. He says, "What score in Week 1 kind of starts the road to recovery for Dabo and Clemson's football perception?" It's hard to place a score on it because scores are not always telling of how a game plays out. Maybe there's a world where a team can win 35-21, per se. Just throwing out an example, and it looks very, and they can get to that score in, very different ways. Like you could be up 35-7 and give up 2 late touchdowns, but you really dominated the majority of the game. Or, it was a tight game throughout, maybe a turnover or a pick six goes the other direction, and the team ends up, the winning team ends up winning by 2 scores, but in reality it was a back and forth game for a lot. So, I mean, it really just depends on how the game plays out, not necessarily the score. Like if Clemson looks like they belong on the field, I think that's more than enough. And I think they have the talent to belong on the field, but it really is just about, especially from an offensive standpoint, looking like you belong.
The big thing, the big thing with Week 1 in Georgia is how is Clemson's offense going to fare? Are they truly an improved offense? What is year 2 under Garrett Riley going to look like? If it looks like Week 1, we're going to get absolutely demolished, and it's going to be a total embarrassment on national television. It's really based off of how much the offensive side of the ball has improved, and obviously starting with the offensive line, but Cade Klubnik's development, his ability to read the field and make the proper decisions and play within the system that Garrett Riley is putting him in, the receivers, but really it's the offensive side of the ball will determine how competitive Clemson is in Week 1 against Georgia. And if they are truly improved to the ability that their roster says they can be, it could be a competitive game. If they're not, it's going to be, a bloodbath, if you will.
Yeah.
The defensive side of the ball, I don't think there's – not that there's no questions on Clemson's defense. There obviously is. But as a whole, there's not a ton of questions about Clemson's defense or Wes Goodwin's ability to produce a top-level defense at Clemson. So, really, I don't know what the score, what score it would be to be like, oh, that's okay. I don't really like to really get into that, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It depends on how the game plays out. I don't think there's a number we could say right now to be like, oh, if Georgia had this and Clemson had this, we'd be 100% okay with it, right? I want to win the game first and foremost. So that's what I want to see happen. But, I don't know. That's a long-winded way of saying I have no idea what that score would be.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, obviously winning the game flat out would do a lot So, that's kind of the way I want to look at it, is like, okay, well, just go out and win. Like, don't worry about what, how much do we have, can we afford to lose by to not be embarrassed on national television? Like, I think Clemson can beat Georgia. I'll say that right out. I think they absolutely can beat Georgia. And if, things that we needed to see improve from last season do, and the steps that, should have been taken, have been from, from the quarterback standpoint, from the offensive line standpoint. Yeah, I mean, I think you can beat Georgia, especially with the defense that you have. I think you have a chance to stay in that game and make it competitive. Yeah, despite what the point spread may say, but just going out and winning it, as opposed to just talking about, I was like, oh man, I hope we don't get beat too bad. I think that's better than that's the better way to look at it for me. And that's not me picking Clemson to beat Georgia, by the way. So, and we'll talk about that, and we'll do a whole Georgia preview, as we get closer to the year, and well, obviously the show before, we'll make our predictions and all that. But yeah, I just can't be. Yeah, I mean, if Clemson wants to return to where they are, I mean, these are the kind of games you have to win. So we'll see. I think I made SEC Dog a little upset, but it is what it is. I mean, what do you want me to say? I said Clemson can beat Georgia. Yeah, based on a lot of things. Based on based on the defense. Yes, based on the skill talent that Clemson brings back, and the skill talent that they've added. This is the best wide receiver room they've had in about 4 years. You bring back a really talented running back. Year 2 in Garrett Riley's system. 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line. You made the hire of Matt Luke. A lot of reasons to think the offense improves, but it's really just about how much we don't know.
Yeah, we have no idea.
But with the defense that Clemson brings back, the load of talent that you've brought in this recruiting class, that I think some of the a lot of these guys are going to be able to contribute. I think Clemson can beat Georgia. They said they can. I didn't say they will or it's likely, but I think they can, and they'll need things to go. They'll need things to go right. I think Georgia is the better team. Don't get me wrong. I think Georgia's one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. So it's not saying much to say that Georgia's the better team, but I think there is a world. And based on I know Georgia's roster pretty well, and Clemson's. There is a world where Clemson beats Georgia. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, look, nobody in Vegas is going to pick it. No linemakers are going to pick it. There won't be very much money coming in on Clemson, but there's a world out there where it is in the realm of possibility that Georgia loses to Clemson, right? Albeit unlikely, right?
Yeah.
On surface level, judging by the trajectory of the 2 programs and how the past couple seasons have gone for each individual program, right? But that doesn't mean that Clemson doesn't have the talent to compete with Georgia. I mean, I understand that Georgia is in a far better place as a program standpoint as it stands right now on June 6, 2024 than Clemson is. But let's not pretend like Clemson doesn't have the talent on the roster to beat a team like Georgia. That's just simply not true. It's not true. And, just like you, Jordan, I'm not saying they will beat them, but they have the talent on the roster. It's just about the coaches on the offensive side of the ball specifically getting it together and it getting much, much better on that side of the ball. But the talent's there to compete. And if you can compete with a team, that means you can beat a team on any given day, right?
Right.
So, again, the good thing about it is the game will have to be played. And the score will be what it is. And then we'll all know, right, whether Clemson could keep the game close, win the game, get absolutely obliterated, whatever the case may be. It'll all play out on August 31st. We don't have to wait too terribly much longer. But, I understand Georgia and SEC dogs' confidence. I would be confident as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Like it wouldn't make sense to have a Georgia fan be like, well, I don't know, it's like I'm kind of worried, but like no, like Georgia coming into the season, the point spread is what it is for a reason, and so that's I would be confident as well, but I'm just I am confident. I don't want to say confident, but I know what Clemson has on the roster, and if you get the ingredients together and you're able to produce up to the talent level that the roster says you should be, then yeah, you can beat Georgia. But again, that has everything. Everything has to go right. You have to the offense has to play up to their talent level. Cade has to play up to his talent level. The offensive line has to play up to their talent level. The wide receivers, I love these wide receivers. I love this group. I really do. I really am excited about this group. But they got to show it too. I love having Jake Brenningstool and Phil Maffa back. They have to be Jake Brenningstool and Phil Maffa.
Yeah.
All of that has to happen. So it's like that's why it's not no one's saying Clemson is going to be Georgia or that it's likely.
No,
because Clemson needs things to go right, and even if all those things happen, Clemson could still lose the game. Like they might need a break here or two. Maybe Carson Beck throws a turnover. Like there's a lot that has to go right for Clemson to win, but they are not completely outclassed from a roster standpoint to the point where it's like, oh, we should just lay down and I would just move on to week 2. Like this is a game that Clemson, has the ability to win, not the likelihood to win. So that's my big long Georgia speech. We were still really basically 3 months, but a little under 3 months out from that game. But and we'll talk about it more. But I do that's my I'm not going into this Georgia game completely. I'm just looking to App State. Like I just hope we look good against App State next week. Like this game matters for a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
Clemson Georgia Clemson Georgia is a historical rival, just for a lot of reasons, geographic, recruiting, all of that. I mean, you go head to head with them every single year for recruits. Kirby Smart is the top coach in the game right now. Like a win over them would do wonders for obvious reasons. So I'm not, going into this game thinking, so Georgia doesn't beat us, but too bad. Like I don't like. That's not what Clemson. That's not what Clemson is. That's just they're not going to go into any game, thinking that's where they stand. And knowing I'm not being delusional or anything like that. I know what Clemson recruits to, the type of players they have. I know the type of athletes and players that Georgia has. And I think Clemson has the prerequisite talent to belong on that same field. And that's all there is to it. That's all there is.
Yeah.
Sorry for the long rant. Couple more questions, preferably not about Georgia. The chat's fired up.
Oh yeah. SDC dogs going back and forth with the chat. They're all going at each other. So.
Dylan says, I can see bubble screens to TJ Moore and run ball at the middle with Maffa and deep pass to Jake Brenningstool and Antonio Williams. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think, TJ Moore absolutely is a guy that is electric with the ball in his hands. I think you're going to see Bryant Wesco involved in the spring game a lot. The screen game a lot. He did a lot of the.
He was involved in the spring game.
He was very involved in the spring game, so I wasn't technically wrong. But I think but it's already happened. But yeah, I think you'll see Bryant Wesco involved in the screen game. He was involved. I mean, when you watch his high school tape, like they did a lot to get him the ball in space. Like he's a really, really good electric player. I mean, he's not like he doesn't have elite speed, but he's elusive, makes guys miss, and he's for his size, he's really tough to tackle. I think you'll see Wesco involved in the screen game a lot. Obviously, I mean, Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown are guys they'll be involved there. Cole Turner. But yeah, I think the development of the vertical passing game, I think, is going to be the biggest story about how successful this offense is. I mean, if you're hitting the explosive plays, that opens everything up, and you have guys that can get down the field. Jake Brinkstool as a tight end can certainly give you a lot down the field as a receiving weapon. Really, just Adam Randall as a boundary guy. I mean, that's really all he did last year was run go routes. Like they didn't really have him do a whole ton of else. And so I think he gives you that big physical boundary receiver, and if he obviously I think he trusts his body a lot more, and he was a big story in spring. And so if we see the Adam Randall we hope we were getting, that's just a plus. Do you have Troy Stellato, who can do he really can do pretty much anything you need him to. He can get down the field. He's great with the ball in his hands. You can run him across the middle, drags, curls. He does a lot. Like he's a really great safety blanket to have in the flat. Like there's a lot you can do there. And then that's one of the reasons I'm so high on this, this receiving room, is just because you have so many guys that can give you a lot of different stuff. And that's just something that Clemson hasn't had in a few years. And it's certainly a large reason why the offenses weren't nearly as successful. So, it's exciting. And you just, Lord willing, that the injury part, which has been the biggest plague to this room over the last couple of seasons, that doesn't come back to bite you. But you do also have more depth as well.
Really, since the 2021 season, we have yet to make it through a season without substantial injuries to that wide receiver room. So hopefully the tide will be turning for us this year, and we'll get a bit more of a healthy season out of that group. We've kind of covered those guys, at length on this show and on this channel, and how we feel about the group overall and the depth of that group. So I think we're in a really good place. I know most people around the country that are not Clemson fans are probably still saying you can't name a single player on Clemson's wide receiver core. But if things go our way this year and we can get this offensive scheme and stuff established with Garrett Riley and get some things turned around, there'll be some names out there that are known on the national stage when it comes to Clemson wide receivers again.
Absolutely.
Again,
there's a real possibility. We look back and you'll see end of year graphics and Clemson was had one of the better wide receiver rooms in the country.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent. But again, you got to see it. I got to see it to believe it, right? We've been excited in years past coming into seasons, and the offense has underperformed pretty much since 2021. So hopefully we get it turned around and headed in the right direction this year, specifically on that side of the ball.
Yeah. And I'm probably, I'm probably more on the extreme here because, I know there's a lot of apprehension and for good reason about this room. But I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, man. I just and you know, the more I've sat on it, the more I really love what this group can be this year. And so
Well,
uh,
I understand where you're at with that, Jordan.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the biggest, I guess, insurance policies that you have, if you're looking at Clemson's roster as a Clemson fan and you're kind of hoping for the best for this upcoming season and kind of the explosiveness of this offense to turn around, is the various different types of body types that you have in that room now. They don't all look the same like they did at one point in time. And then the sheer depth that you have there. So, you know, if injuries do happen again this season, which, you know, feels inevitable at this point in our wide receiver room, you have that depth, I think, to endure some injuries in that group and still be really talented and have big contributors, regardless of what happens there. So I think there's a little more reasons to be optimistic just because of the depth that is in that room. And surprisingly enough, none of those guys left via the transfer portal, which I thought was a real possibility heading out of spring practice. We talked about it, and that did not happen. So, you know, I think there's some reasonable optimism heading into the season for that group. But again, it's gotta produce on the field, right? It's gotta happen.
Well, and at the end of the day, they're not going to reach their potential if Cade can't get them the ball. That's the reality. Like and so like that's something that I should have made clear. But I love this room, and I think, you know, they would be successful. Like basically, I think this group would be good, like basically anywhere. But you still have to. I mean, you still have to have the quarterback play. You still have to be able to throw them the ball and on time and get them the ball in their hands, and that's where the excitement is kind of. You have to rein it back a little bit because it's like, well, at the end of the day, Cade is still an unknown as far as what we're going to get out of him this year. I think he'll be better than last year. How much better? And has he gotten enough better to where this offense is running at the clip that we all thought it would last season?
Yeah, absolutely. But
absolutely. All right. I see some people talking about Jeff Scott. Yeah. I mean, wide receiver has been an issue since Scott left for USF. Yeah. I mean, to a degree, I mean, wide receiver certainly is, you know, the fall of the wide receiver room certainly, you know, happened when around the time when Jeff Scott left. But, you know, I think part of that was because his last class was just not particularly good. That didn't help. And you know, 2020 happened, and you still had the remnants of the last really good wide receiver classes. I mean, obviously you had Amari Rodgers and Cornell Powell doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that wide receiver room, and you know there was still excitement about Joseph Ngata and Frank Ladson, but couldn't stay healthy, which is obviously a trend that would continue in the latter years. And then I mean, EJ Williams flashed. We thought, oh man, next Justin Ross, even went to the same high school. Like this is perfect. And you know, speaking of Justin Ross, obviously the devastating neck condition and surgery, just it permanently altered him in his career. And so you have all of those things. You have a wide receiver class that just couldn't stay healthy, and then the two big guys couldn't stay healthy, and then the rest just did not pan out. And then your best receiver, you know, didn't play for a full season and came back, you know, 50% of himself, and he played with a broken foot for most of the year.
Yeah.
And you just never got any consistency. And because, you know, you add the issues that DJ had as a starter in 2021 and all the injuries that piled on that season, like all of those things happened at within like a 2-year span. you have your wide receiver coach leave, and his class that he brought in didn't pan out. They couldn't stay healthy. Your quarterback has his own issues that doubly hurt the offense. The offensive line, I didn't even mention all of that. So much happened at one particular time. And
Right.
of course, you have COVID, which impacted your recruiting and your evaluations. All of that just really, I think, was crippling in a lot of ways to Clemson's offensive, success. Their and the wide receivers and offensive line in particular, I think, were just it just was not. They weren't able to recover, and you had a lot of misses. You had a lot of guys get injured, and that in turn hurt your quarterback play. And you developed a reputation. You lost the pedigree that you once had from an offensive standpoint. It really was just a nightmare scenario when you look back at it in the totality.
Yeah, a lot happened.
A lot happened.
You explained it really well, and I know the popular opinion with some Clemson fans is when Jeff Scott left, the wide receiver core kind of fell apart. And timeline-wise, that does kind of work out. But let's not forget that those were his guys still in the room.
Yeah.
And you kind of laid it out. They did not work out. We started to have almost zero diversity in body type because of recruiting. So I think that was a problem. But I think the recruiting has started to turn around in the wide receiver room. We're starting to get that diversity and body type back. We got those smaller, quick twitch guys that can, obviously perform in the screen game and across the middle and things like that. Those speedy guys. We got the big physical guys outside now. We just need them to put it together on the field. I think our wide receiver room is still a work in progress when it comes to producing on the field, but I think the talent is there, right? And we'll see. I know a lot of people point to wide receiver coach as maybe they think Dabo needs to make a change there, and I think that's still to be determined. Obviously, I think this year is a huge year for that, right? If you can't produce with this wide receiver group, maybe it is time to reevaluate that and see where we're at the end of the season, right? But right now we're locked in with who we have. I think we have great talent on the roster, and I can't wait to see what this wide receiver room is able to put on the field this year. Jeff Scott's obviously back in Clemson. He's not coaching. He's not looking to coach right now. If he was, he'd probably have something be back with the program in some form or fashion or some capacity. He would be back with the program, but he's not. He's chilling. He's collecting that money from USF still. He's probably getting some much-needed family time. And if he wants to get back in coaching, it'll be on his timeline. So for right now, Jeff Scott is not an option. So I know there's a lot of fans out there that want him super bad, but he's made it clear. He's gone on interviews, and he's made it clear that he is not interested in getting back into coaching, at least right now. I'm sure that'll change in the future. He's still a young guy, still got a lot of coaching in front of him, but right now he's not interested.
Absolutely. And PJ just asked, who doesn't miss on recruits? I mean, everybody misses on recruits, and that's not what we're saying. It's not like, oh, okay, you missed on a couple of guys here or there. It was an entire class of wide receivers, really almost two full classes of wide receivers that never panned out. I mean, yeah. you go back to the 2019 class. You had Joseph Ngata. I mean, I have to look because my memory, I don't have these guys off my memory, but Joseph Ngata was in that class. Frank Ladson was in that class. Neither one panned out. I mean, Joseph Ngata was fine, but never, was never consistent, could never stay healthy, and just never became what we all thought he was, coming in. Frank Ladson, we know what happened to him. Couldn't stay healthy, transfers out. And I want to point this out because, like,
thank you.
Because some people are going to want to say that, okay, well, maybe these guys aren't panning out because Jeff Scott wasn't there and Tyler Grisham just didn't coach them up well.
Lack of development, yeah.
You could see. I mean, you could make that argument,
right?
But then when you look at where these guys ended up and where, especially the guys that transferred out, there hasn't been a single one of those final Jeff Scott recruits that transferred and panned out and did anything. Nope. None of them. Frank Ladson was basically a non-factor for most of his time at Miami. I think, is he still on the roster? I think he might. Does he have a year of eligibility? I know he was on it last year. He hardly played.
Yeah, he was there last year. I don't know if he's still this year or I have no idea, honestly.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not even sure. EJ Williams, bench warmer at Indiana. Yeah. I don't even. I want to put that in perspective, and like this is not to slant, like to bash the these particular players, but I want to put into perspective, like you can tell when these guys transfer out and they're non-factors elsewhere that, quite frankly, there were it has more to do with them than the people coaching them. You guys remember Ajo?
Yeah.
I mean, he I think he had a touchdown this past week in like the Canadian Football League or something. So that'd be great for him, but didn't have much of a college career. Went, he followed Jeff Scott down to USF, non-factor. Hardly played. Dakari Collins. Well, and he wasn't even really a Jeff Scott recruit, so this is probably not fair. But he's still one of those wide receivers that haven't panned out. Now we'll see. His career's not over, and they're expecting him to take on a bigger role in NC State. But there's so much that about those latter classes that wasn't all just Tyler Grisham not being a good coach. Like and it's a lot of fans wanted to say at that point. And I understand that sentiment, especially during the time. It was like, why are our wide receivers, like, why do they suck now?
Because we went from just churning out these elite level wide receivers to what the heck happened to Clemson and their wide receiver core, right? So I get the sentiment, and it's never like all one thing or all the other thing, right? Like there was a combination of things that you kind of laid out earlier that happened, right? It's not Jeff Scott's fault that these guys didn't pan out, right? They just sometimes you just miss on guys. It is what it is. He's clearly a good evaluator and a good recruiter. Look at all the guys that he brought in before these guys that didn't pan out, right? And maybe there is a learning curve with Tyler Grisham, and he wasn't developing guys to the level that he should be developing guys, right? Maybe he's still not. That's yet to be seen. That's yet to be fully determined, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into this of guys not panning out, Jeff Scott leaving, injuries, Tyler Grisham probably doing a little bit of learning on the job, right? Not necessarily having his processes down pat for being a wide receiver coach yet. Remember, just because you played a position doesn't mean you can coach that position. So there is a lot of that.
Especially not right away. I mean, there's a learning curve.
It takes learning. It takes, being able to relate to these guys and explain it in a way that makes sense and understands to them. And then you have to be able to get buy-in from those guys, right? So I'm not saying that Tyler Grisham is or isn't a good coach. I'm saying this is kind of his year to kind of prove it, in my opinion, with this group of guys. And if the production doesn't significantly increase, then maybe it's something that you need to reevaluate come off season, right? But a lot of factors that you laid out very well, Jordan, went into kind of where we sit right now as the wide receiver situation at Clemson.
Peter seems to think I'm trying to slander Jeff Scott. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying his last class just wasn't good, and that contributed to why the wide receiver room fell off. I'm not blaming Jeff Scott. I'm just saying that's just the reality of what it is. I would love to have Jeff Scott back in some form or fashion, because not only was he a good wide, I mean, I mean, even if he's not the wide receiver coach, he was a phenomenal recruiter. And he was a reason you landed more than just the wide receivers you got. He was like he sold Clemson better than anybody not named Dabo Sweet.
We can bring him back, and if he doesn't want to do on-field coaching, hey, just make that guy your recruiting coordinator, man.
Yeah,
and he could just focus on recruiting, and I'd be 100% okay with that. That dude can identify talent. He can recruit like none other. So yeah, you're not getting no Jeff Scott sucks from me. No, he's a great coach. He's a really good coach. Didn't pan out for him at South Florida, but that is what it is. I could care less what he does as a head coach. I hope he comes back with Clemson in some capacity eventually, but he's just made it clear recently that, or not recently, but once he came back to Clemson, a lot of people thought that, he's going to be right back with the staff. And, for whatever reason, that's just not what he wanted. He wanted to take a break. He wanted to, relax and be with family. And, I'm sure it's not easy being a head coach somewhere where things are not going your way, and the stress of that, of you going somewhere and your program failing, and, the stress that puts on your family, I get it. You want to take some time away from the game. You want to be with your family. But, I, for one, hope that he does get back with Clemson in some capacity, whatever that is at the time.
P. Digit says, I can't stand Jeff Scott now after this episode. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, that's all right, Pete. He's giving me a hard time, I guess. John asks, did Dominic Thomas ever get a new spot? Yeah, he's at Ole Miss now.
Yeah, he went to Ole Miss. That's going to be interesting.
John piling on. Good to see you, man. He says, Jeff Scott isn't that good.
No, definitely not, John. Definitely not.
Yeah, I'm gonna start leaning into it. We're gonna rename the show "Jeff Scott Sucks" live. Oh man,
that's funny.
SEC Dot says, "Great show, guys. Love having fun with y'all. Appreciate real talk. 5-star show. We greatly appreciate that, SEC Dog, and we love having you, man. And I enjoy our back and forths all the time. So
yeah, absolutely, man. Keep showing up. Keep the trash talk coming. I love it. And it's going to be a fun one. It's either going to be really good for us or really good for SEC Dog come the night, or I guess the afternoon, I should say, of August 31st. But he'll be in here for sure. I know he will. We'll one of us will have to take our medicine.
Yeah, SEC. He says Jordan knows me. He knows I like to rile people. Yeah, man. I'm familiar with SEC Dog's game. I'm familiar.
He's pretty good at it.
Yeah, he does a good job at it, and that's I appreciate him for that. That's what makes college football so fun. It's just the fan base. It's really you can't. I mean, the NFL, like the fans are, they trash talk, but there's something different about college football because it's just so regionally tied, and I mean, despite what the changes in the sport that have happened, like it's still ultimately it's still a regional sport, and there's just so much emotion tied to just the college game that you won't find in the NFL, and that's what makes the banter and the trash talk so fun.
Yeah, man. There's nothing like it.
And conversely, it hits you different. Someone could tell me the Titans suck, and I'm like, all right,
yeah, whatever.
But you tell me Clemson sucks. Well, I'll be like, well, what do you mean by that? And it's isn't your team? And then like, hey, who's your team? Like that's the common rebuttal if they don't have
your blood pressure goes up instantly a couple points as soon as somebody starts talking about your team. Like, hold up, what you mean? What you mean my team sucks? Who's your team?
It's different, man.
So, yeah, man. That's what makes college football so much fun, man. It's so unique. Is like the passion within the fan bases, and then that a lot of times translates to the trash talk and the deep-seated hatred and the rivalries and the environments that you go to, man. Like I've said it on the show before, but just if you've never been to an NFL game, go to one. If you've never been to a college game, go to one. And to me, that's the best way I can explain the difference in the NFL and college football.
Yeah.
It's not even close, man. I don't even need to say anything. Just go to one game, go to another game, and that'll speak for itself right there.
Yeah, it's a totally different. It's the same ball, different sport, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's just really
completely different.
All right. Well, after that, I think that's a great way to close this off. A nice little conclusion to that little saga and that we went on. That is the wrong banner. But seriously, thank you guys. We're at the 2-hour 20 mark. We spent a lot of this time just chopping it up with y'all, answering your questions. I mean, obviously we hit on the official visit weekend and the 2 commitments, but we really wanted to make this show about you guys and just any thoughts you have about, recruiting the team this upcoming season. And, it's always my favorite part of the show. I don't know about you, but like, I always enjoy just chopping it up with the comment section, even more so than, the stuff we talk about, during the show. It's different. And I love interacting with you guys. And, it's really cool that you and I, we get to have this platform to do that. And so, I'm grateful for it every second. So with that being said, thank you guys so much. Another great show.
Absolutely, man.
Of course, same time every single week, Thursdays, 8 p.m. Please hit that like button on your way out, and feel free to check out all of our other channels. Check out the links in the description. And also in the description, shortly after the stream ends, we will have timestamps for all the stuff we talked about. And, really it'll just be about the official visit weekend and the commitments and then listener questions. So it won't be a ton of stuff. But be on the lookout for that for those of you guys. And for those of you guys on the rewatch squad, or you want to, you came in late and want to see something that we talked about that you didn't get to see. So, with that being said, Tiger Balk Raven, you got any parting words for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you guys for all being here. Make sure you hit that like button on the way out. That's the best way that you can support us here. Thanks for being the best part of the show. I love the energy in the comment section tonight. It was great. Shout out to SEC Dog for getting everybody riled up in the comment section and waking it up. He was lighting fires in there today. Shout out to all the Clemson fans, putting him back in his place as he should be. And I think P Digits kind of summed the show up the best. Hold on, I gotta find it because
I see it.
He said, "Good show," and Jeff Scott blows. I think we're going to end it there, man. Same time next week, 8 p.m. We'll be right here for another edition of the All In Show. Until then, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.